Thank you all for coming, and welcome to the Center for Family Business and Entrepreneurship here at St. Joseph's University. We're thrilled to have you. We are deeply, deeply committed to family businesses and ensuring their long-term success. We know that if family businesses are going to be competitive and successful in the long term, they have to do three things. One of the things they have to do is have regular family ownership meetings. Secondly, they need to have some kind of a board in which there's discussions, regular discussions about strategy. Where are we going? And third, there needs to be a very clear plan, a board of directors, and a very clear strategic plan. So some kind of strategic plan that holds us accountable for long-term performance. And in today's world, we can't avoid the fact that we are in a global marketplace and we have to compete in that way. One of the things that we're committed to in doing here at St. Joseph's University is being very deliberate in providing specific tools that family businesses need to compete in the long term. We mentioned that family businesses need a strategic plan. There's management level planning, there's ownership level planning. One of the things we do here at St. Joe's is help our family businesses put together an ownership level strategic plan. Where are we going as an ownership group? Second, we have regular educational events like this. We have a regular process of helping you evaluate the entrepreneurial capabilities of the next generation and putting together a plan for success, long-term success for those entrepreneurs. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Greg Lichtenstein, is in charge of that process. Greg, why don't you say hello, wave. And several of the members in the room have taken advantage of that, and Lori, as an example, just went through the process with Greg. And it is, again, it's about understanding where you are as an entrepreneurial leader and how do you improve. So developing and putting together very specific skills for how we continue to improve as an entrepreneurial leader. We have an exciting and dynamite monthly webinar series. And for all of our members, you have access on a monthly basis to a monthly webinar related to specific issues related to competitiveness in the family business setting, and a whole bunch of other forms of support. One of the most important components of that is our sponsors. And our sponsors are deeply committed to helping us succeed. They provide financial resources, intellectual capital, and they have years and years of experience working with family business. Sean Bard, Sean just waved from PricewaterhouseCoopers, has been with us from the beginning, an incredible resource. Scott Trotter and the Trotters and many other folks from Creative Financial Group and MetLife have been huge supporters. From AUA Capital, Mike Salerno, Family Office. Morgan Stanley is here. Phil Marchese. Saul Ewing, our law sponsor, has been an amazing sponsor as well. And then we have several other folks who have worked closely with us. So just a dynamite group of people. There was a really interesting article in Business Week recently, and it said the 3 scariest words for any American business leader, North American business. And those 3 scariest words were? What were they? Anybody know? You're fired? China price. And the fact is that every single one of us in this room need to be thinking about the China price. Because it's the China price, or it's Walmart, or it's Home Depot, or whoever it is. That level of competition is coming. And the question for us as we lead family businesses is, are we prepared? Have we thought about those issues? And are we prepared for what happens whether it's a China price or it's Walmart or some other event like that happens? Are you prepared? Again, a list of our sponsors who are folks who are out there to help us prepare. One of the fundamental questions that we think any family business leader needs to ask regarding this issue of the China price is, do we want to be in harvest mode or are we in growth mode? And given the fact that Walmart is coming, or it's Home Depot is coming, or the China price is coming, the question for us as family business leaders is a really fundamental, at its most core level. Are we in growth mode or are we in harvest mode? And if we're in growth mode, it means A, and if we're in harvest mode, it means what? If we're in harvest mode, it means, pardon me? It means big. If we're in, it means be big. If we're in growth mode, it means, yeah, we want to be big. We want to grow. We're prepared to fight. And if we're in harvest mode, it means what? It's the opposite of growth mode. It means what? What are we doing? Protecting. We're in preservation mode. We're in harvest mode. We're in taking dividends and putting them. Is there anything wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. The issue that we see from family businesses is they haven't talked about it. And they haven't decided deliberately whether we're in growth mode or we're in harvest mode. And that's the key issue. So there's no right or wrong answer. The key is just let's be deliberate about it. Let's have an honest conversation about whether we are in harvest mode or whether we are in growth mode. One of the exercises that we do with family businesses every time we sit down to work with them, we do this with all our members, is the newspaper exercise. And since we're in Philadelphia, we call it the Philadelphia Inquirer exercise. And the exercise is to get the ownership group to sit down and ask themselves, if you could open up the Philadelphia Inquirer 10 years from today in 2014, and that article could say absolutely anything about your business, about your family, and about you, what would it say? Again, getting the family ownership group to talk about what would they like to see happen. In effect, we're challenging you to define your vision for the future. Do you want to be in harvest mode? Do you want to be in growth mode? But what do you want to see for your family, for your business, and for you as an individual? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And pushing families, owners, shareholders to have that kind of discussion and acknowledge up front that it's okay if I'm a family business next generation person and I decide I want to be a football coach and I'm done with this, that's okay. And that's my vision for in 10 years I want to be a football coach. We need to be okay with that. But very few families sit down and actually do this work, and yet is absolutely critical to long-term success. If we don't know where north is, how do we get there? And consistent with that, and we're going to certainly hear that from some of our, in particular, Healey family, it's the idea of challenging ourselves as we think about where we want to be over the next 10 years, asking the fundamental question of, do we want to be, what kind of family business do we want to be, and do we want to be an enterprising family? Do we want to be an enterprising family? If we're serious about competing in the global marketplace, we have to commit to not just taking and working with our lawyers to pass the shares of our business from one generation to the next. It goes way beyond an estate planning process, and it goes to passing a mindset of entrepreneurship to the next generation. And we would argue that if you're going to compete, and whether you're competing with someone down the street or someone from Germany or China or wherever, your job as a leader of a family business is to say, A, do we want to compete? But secondly, to say, we have to pass a mindset of entrepreneurship to the next generation. Because that is the only way we're going to be around in 10 years. The only way. And specifically, to be an enterprising family, when sitting down and talking about issues at the ownership level, we want to push families at the shareholder level to change how they think and how they talk. And if you look at this graph, the purpose of the graph is on the horizontal axis is to transition how we think and talk when we're in shareholder meetings from a mindset of we are managers to a mindset of we are entrepreneurs, to a mindset of we have a responsibility to create new streams of wealth, to a mindset of continually searching for new opportunities. I remember working with a grocery store chain, and we were talking about this concept, and the successor generation folks were worried about the fact that Wegmans was coming to town, and they're thinking, well, how do we compete with Wegmans? Should we sell? Should we build condos on this great site? And Dad is saying, what about the shopping carts? There's shopping carts out in the parking lot right now, and Mrs. Smith is going to bump into the shopping carts. And it was such a clear representation of the senior generation being stuck in managerial mindset, while the successor generation, in this case, was thinking entrepreneurially. And we want, if we're going to be, it's not to say that we don't worry about the shopping carts, we do, but that is when we have our management hats on. And when we have our ownership hats on, we want to be challenging ourselves to be thinking like entrepreneurs. And similarly, on the vertical axis, to take off our operational hats and put on our investor hats. It's to say, to transition beyond a family that makes beer, or a family that sells food, or a family that remanufactures automobile parts, or a family that manufactures boats. To transition beyond the production unit mentality. Yes, we remanufacture automobile parts, and yes, we manufacture boats, and that's critical. We got to do that really well. But when we are working together as shareholders, we put on our investor hat, which is to say, when we, and just think about this for a moment, because this is very important for family businesses at the shareholder level to do. When we have our production hat on and we're sitting around and talking, what are we talking about? What are the kinds of issues we're worried about? Pardon me? Operational issues. Are we getting the product out the door? What are our costs? What are expenses? How's this manager doing? How's that manager doing? If we are the same group and we put our investor hats on and we're having a shareholder meeting, what are the kinds of questions we ask? Cash flow, that's management. But if, pardon me? And that's tied to cash flow. What's the performance? What kind of return are we getting on our investment? Is this a good allocation of our cash? Is this where we want to be from a risk perspective? Is this the arena we want to even be competing in? Just like you do implicitly when you decide if you're going to buy Amazon or if you're going to buy IBM or General Motors. You make that decision implicitly all the time with the stocks you invest in. We want to see family business shareholders asking themselves those same questions. It's taking off the production unit hat and putting on the economic unit hat. And that's, again, when we are managers in the business, we got to be thinking production, we got to be thinking about operational issues. We're challenging families to transition from just doing that to transitioning and thinking about themselves as an economic unit, thinking as an investors. That's a very different mindset. And it acknowledges that this family business, and what we're going to see from our panelists today, is that these are family businesses that recognize that the only way we can compete internationally, the only way we compete with Home Depot or Walmart or the China price, is if we acknowledge that our business is a family business, that we are a system. That we are a system, much like our human body is a system, much like a great boat or a great car is a system. It only works if all the parts are functioning. So if I were to ask you, what is the most important organ in my body or your body, you would say what? The heart? The brain? Any others? The colon? Yeah, right, I've heard that you've seen that one. My skin? If I have, if I lose my skin, I die. If my heart shuts down, I die. My liver shuts down, I die. The point is, this body of ours is a system, and it works well when all those parts function together. And a family business, here's the key message: a family business is a system. And senior generation folks don't want to acknowledge it. They want to focus only on the business side because what they're good at. It makes sense. We've been doing it for years and years and years. And when we walk in the door, senior generation family member walks in the door and says to, jump, the person says, how high? But in a family business, it is different. And it's different because it's a system, and it's a system comprised of three parts that we can't separate if we want to be competitive. And the three parts are, yes, the business, but also the family and the individual. And as leaders of family businesses, we have to manage all parts of the system. And when we do that well, we have an opportunity for a familyness advantage. We manage the firm well, the family well, and the individuals, and manage the interaction between those three parts. We have an opportunity for something truly, truly unique. And that is a familyness advantage. And all of our panelists here will talk about that because they all three have a familyness advantage. And a familyness advantage is a unique, something truly unique, something different that allows us to compete against China, against Germany, against Walmart, against Home Depot, and that it implies that we have some special resource, some special capability, some special sauce that allows us to do things differently and better. And it's tied to our family. And when we do things differently, better, offer a better service, a lower cost, and that unique thing that allows us to do that is tied to the family, we have by definition a competitive advantage that is tied to our family. We have a familyness advantage. And that's the Holy Grail. Because if you have that, you can compete against anybody. Anybody. Familyness is a unique bundle of resources a firm has because of how the family and the business and the individual interact together. And our job as leaders is to acknowledge, yeah, it's fun to just focus on the business, but the reality is I have a heart and I have a liver. And if I have liver disease, I've got to take care of it. And if I've got an issue with my family, I've got to address it. And if we're going to be great family business, we have to think about managing all three parts of that system. Familyness advantage can come in the form of capital, a long-term commitment, a commitment to long-term investing in the long term. It can come in the form of decision-making, making fast decisions because there's an enormous amount of trust, or reputation, or unique alliances, or leadership. And I think all three of our panelists have examples of that in their business. At the end of the day, the question for us as family business leaders, for your family business, for your clients, if your clients are family business, is to be brutally honest about answering this question. And the question is, where is your familyness an advantage and where is it a constraint? And to not be afraid of being honest as we look at these issues and looking at them, again, as Colin says, with brutal honesty. Because in all families, mine included, there are good things and bad things. And all family businesses, familyness is both an advantage and a constraint at times. Issues, can we really talk about them? Not be afraid of them. And this is a framework that I want to push families, we push families to really think about. Because when you do this, use this framework, and we use it all the time, you can compete in any marketplace. And the question is, for family business, I think, is what are some of the unique resources and capabilities that you have in your firm? And are any of those resources and capabilities tied to your family? Tied to the fact that you're owned by a family? And then, can you build a strategy based on those resources? And if you do those two things, the first box and the second one, then you have a competitive advantage. And that's really, really phenomenal. These are just some examples of them, but the other question then is, what are you doing to invest in and manage those unique resources and capabilities? We have with us here today 3 successor generation family members who are now leading their family business and are able to do that because the senior generation did this. They managed and invested in resources. And 3 of them are right here today. Final challenge, I think, for businesses as they wade into the world of global competition is to, again, go back to that question of the vision and ask ourselves, have we been clear about it? And then acknowledge that the reality of the global marketplace, the reality of competing with Home Depot is hard and it is ugly. And the reality of running a family business is hard and ugly. And sometimes I love my son and sometimes I want to strangle the bugger. He drives me nuts. And that is a reality of family, and that's a reality of family business. The question for us as leaders is, are we going to manage that tension between the vision of what we have for our family business and the reality of what it takes to function effectively in a family, and what it takes to function effectively in a global marketplace? And how do we deal with constantly changing regulation and healthcare headaches and fill in the blank with all the stuff that you guys deal with every single day? But the question is, are you going to let reality pull your vision back, or is vision going to pull your reality forward? And the best, I just used the example yesterday in class because I was thinking about it the other day. One of the best examples of that is People Express. Does anybody remember People Express, the airline? People Express, yeah. So, when for the older folks in the crowd, People People Express was awesome, and I could catch a plane from where I grew up in Colorado to upstate New York, and it was cheap and it was great. The issue was that after they lost my bags for like the 4th or 5th time, I stopped flying them, and they kept losing my bags because they merged with Braniff, and the complexities of managing a merge, running an acquisition and growing this business, it was like the realities, you just watch the realities pull the vision back for what People Express's vision was in the first place, and it was amazing. Great example of a really great vision that just got pulled back because of tough reality. Can you manage that tension? Can you manage that tension in the face of brutal, hyper-competitive dynamics from all over the world? We have a wonderful panel here today of folks, successor generation folks, who have invested in themselves, who have invested incredible time and energy in their businesses, and have been invested in by the senior generation. Michael Cardone of Cardone Industries, Robert Santiago from Paraplus, and Bob Healey of Viking Group. So I just want to go across. So Michael, tell us a bit about yourself, the business. We saw the rock video. But tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and a little bit of history about the company.
Sure, I'm Michael Cardone III, third generation of the business. I grew up in the business, spending my summers there. Those were always my stories in school, taking apart things and building them back, and that was always kind of a fun thing over the years. I've moved around in basically every area of our business, and there's probably not a job I haven't done. Front office, back office, you name it. So it's been a great experience to go through that, and now I'm president of the company, focused a lot on our strategic growth and acquisitions, mergers, things along those lines. And our business, just kind of, you saw a lot about the product and what we build and what we do. We've got about 6,000 employees, 40% of which are still here in Philadelphia. We were a Philadelphia-based company, started here. Up until 2003, we had 100% of our production here in Philadelphia, in the Northeast. And it's kind of apropos to the China price, low-cost country issue. We had an issue to face in that area, and back in 2003, I started our plant in Mexico. And since subsequently, we moved 60% of our production to Mexico, so that's where we have the bulk of it. And we continue to strategically look at our footprint on a consistent basis. We've got distribution centers in California, Dallas, Philadelphia, and a couple of smaller ones in Canada service that market for hard-to-get parts. And we had a European business. Back in 2012, we sold that and decided to focus on some more growth on the continent, and also looking in probably eventually into South America. Thought that was a better growth opportunity. Europe is a hard place to do business, to say the least. They have great food and great wine, but it's a great place to travel, but it's very hard to do business there. And so we found it a much different environment. But so we're here focused. We've got some great growth opportunities ahead of us.
So Mike, just for those of us who aren't totally familiar with your product, what is it?
We remanufacture automotive parts, and we sell the aftermarket. So out of warranty here in the United States, 90+% of the repairs happen at, call it Joe's Auto Repair Store, not at the dealership. And our product is taking the original equipment unit or part, and you saw all the different ones up there, brake, steering, electronics, things along those lines, and taking it into our operation, completely tearing it apart, assessing each of the individual parts that go into it. We do replace a lot of wear parts, new parts, put that back in line. We fix what needs to be fixed. Sometimes we actually make improvements onto the product that our engineers see that was an original equipment design flaw. And we bring that back up to an original equipment specification that we've reverse engineered from the OE product from the very beginning. And the real value benefit is that's typically sold for 20 to 30% cheaper than new. It also has a huge environmental impact. So we've never actually been able to pitch that as a benefit and get more money for it, but someday that would be a great thing. Most industries you see, a recycled product is not generally cheaper. Get some recycled paper, that's typically a little bit more expensive than a new, so you need to want it to buy it. Even in the car business, hybrid automotive vehicles and things, they're more expensive than the regular gas engines. So you have to kind of want to do it. Our product has the benefit of both. So it's a great business. It's a great product to be in. The market's steady. It's very boring. You don't hear a lot about the aftermarket, but you compound 3 to 5% over a 30-year period, the growth curve looks pretty strong. So we are happy to be in the industry.
Good, good, thanks. Robert Santiago, we didn't get a video because I'm not sure it's as exciting as this remanufacturing or yachts, but tell us about yourself and what your company does.
Robert Santiago, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for PowerPlus Translations. We're a full-service language company, and what that means essentially is we provide interpretation and translation services for various industries in over 100 languages. And so, first of all, I want to thank Mike for having me aboard on the panel. I know we spoke just recently, but when I received the invitation that had changed about a month ago to this global market conversation, I really felt that there was an element here that was right in our wheelhouse in terms of the service that we provide and being able to add to the conversation. And primarily it's about communication. It's different than the products, to the left and right here, but there's a communication element, whether it be communication of your product and services, whether it be your marketing material, whether it be contractual negotiations between organizations that are doing work overseas, or quite frankly your brand, which is really the most important thing, communicating your brand, not only just domestically but internationally as well. So PowerPlus Translations, we're a family-based organization. We've been around for 34 years. My mother founded the organization about 34 years ago. So she herself was a paralegal back in the 80s. And at that time, the law firms that she was working for, they were trotting in clients that didn't speak English. They were asking her to do interpretation and translation right there on the spot. And they were asking her quite enough times where she felt, well, maybe I could do this as a business. And so she kicked my brother and I out of the den, and that was her office. That was her office for quite some time. And she used to answer the telephone in a different voice because she wanted to portray herself into being a much larger organization than she was. And so that's how the organization got started, from an office in the den to the point where we do almost close to $3 million in revenue a year. As far as my route to the organization, it's been a very serendipitous route. I actually graduated with all things a civil engineering degree, like a different lifetime ago, I guess, at this point. But insofar as my involvement in the business, I kind of always felt that if I was going to be involved in the family business, it just needed to be the right time and the right place. And so if you would have asked me about 6 or 7 years ago if I thought I would be in this position, I would have told you you're crazy. There's no way that's going to happen. But things change and perspectives change. And as far as the family dynamic, I'm sure we'll get into some of the conversation later about how that works, at least for our organization. But definitely felt that about 6 or 7 years ago was the right time and the right place. And to be quite honest with you, I've loved it ever since. It's been a great move for me, and really different than the world that I've come from. And really happy to be talking about the organization and talking about the industry, because insofar as this conversation is concerned, I feel like really now more than ever, accurate translation, interpretation services, and localization, and we'll talk a little bit about what that might mean, is really critical into the success of organizations that are doing business globally. And I think that if there's any thought in any of these organizations out here that are going to be doing business globally, and I'm sure there are, otherwise you wouldn't be here so early in the morning. By the way, 7:30 is pretty early. It's critical in the thought process, and not just about your product and services, but how you communicate that, Because if you don't do it right off the gate, you can stumble out of the gate before you even get started, and it can be hard to recover from that. And so,
There's the old the General Motors. The famous story about that is General Motors went into Mexico with a car called the Chevy Nova, which made a lot of sense here in the U.S. But you know what Nova means in Spanish? Nova means no go. So it was the Chevy No Go, and yeah, famous stories. The other one I love. I'm going to turn this down. The other story I love is the story of. It was Ford when they went to India. And Ford, when they went to India, manufactured a car and was thinking to themselves, gee, we need to figure out how to cut costs so we can be competitive in India. So they built the car and they made the automatic windows. They decided, you know what, we're just going to have automatic windows that just go down in front. So the ones in back, we're not going to have those go down. And what they didn't really realize is that in India, anybody buying a Ford is someone who has a chauffeur. So they then built a car in which the window for the actual owner of the car, who sat in the back, wouldn't go down. And just as sort of consistent with your point, Robert, sort of understanding the local context and localization, critical for any business going overseas.
you don't understand the market that you're going in and the individuals and organizations that you're talking to, you can market your brand in a way that's really inconsistent with the area that you're trying to do business.
Absolutely.
And if you do that incorrectly, and those are just a couple, funny but really poignant examples.
Big companies.
Yeah, big companies. You
Smart. Yeah.
won't be successful in those.
Bob, can you pull the microphone and tell us again a little bit about yourself? But Bob's company is, well, we advertised and showed the YouTube video of the fun and kind of, the sexy part of the business, which is these big yachts, and who doesn't like riding on a boat? But there's an entire other side of this business, and I'm going to ask Bob to talk a little bit about how, sort of a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do, and you were, Bob was a rock star. Little known story about Bob, but it's a business that has expanded beyond just being a production unit, and they are truly an enterprising family. So,
okay. My name's Bob Healey Jr. My route to our business was extremely circuitous. I graduated from here, actually, back in 2001. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with my family's business. I worked there as a young man. Much younger, and I decided that my life was being a rock star. So I had a band, which, by the way, was my decision to go to St. Joe's, and I'm glad that I went here, was based on a lot of really good facts. My band was in Philadelphia, so I was going to a Philadelphia school, and I purposely blew my Georgetown interview to make sure that I went here, much to the chagrin of my parents. So imagine, if you will, this beautiful face with a 6-inch mohawk, facial piercings. Most of the tattoos are covered up. So that was me. I ran a promotions company in Philadelphia. I started by basically nobody would book my band. So I decided we would book ourselves. I took the last $400 that I had, rented out a VFW hall on 69th Street. And that expanded over my high school and college career to running 3 separate venues in this city. I had a staff of 20 people, payroll, filed taxes. I mean, it was a business, made money. And then I toured. We signed the day after I graduated, I went out with my father, my mother, and I graduated with a finance degree from St. Joe's. They said, well, my father said, where are you going to go? New York, Philadelphia, LA, London? I said, oh, I found a job. He said, that's wonderful. He said, where? I said, in a van. We just signed a record deal last Wednesday, and I'll be touring for 9 months out of the year, so I'll see you guys later. It was a small mushroom cloud at an Italian restaurant in South Jersey. In any event, I did that for a number of years, paid my bills, which is more than most people who do that can say. I saw a lot of the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Europe, and I'm very, very thankful for it. At some point, and it really doesn't bear explaining to this topic, I decided that I wanted to get out of that. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I figured, I'll just go work for my family business, because what are they going to do, fire me? Also, you know, I'll do it for 6 months and then I'll find something better because I really don't want to work with my parents. I don't want to work with my family at all. I don't get along with them. So I came back and I took my father out to a Fridays and I said, Dad, I want to come back and work for you. And he said, you know, after the last 6 years and the hell you put me through, why the hell would I want you back? Why, you don't even have a skill set to work here. I said, yeah, I do. I ran a business this whole time. Oh, your band's not a business. I said, no, I had a promotions company, and I've been running that, and I've got a 20-person payroll, and I've been filing taxes. And he said, have? I said, yeah. He said, well, who the hell did all your back office work? I said, your CFO, your lawyer. I've been using your business to run my business. So I went back into the family business, and I figured I would do it for 6 months, and I've been there for 7 years. I also went back around 2007, and 6 months later, Lehman crashed. And my father told me then, I'll never forget, if you can make, I said, I guess I picked a pretty bad time to come back into the business. He said, no, Bob, if you can make money now, I'll never worry about you for the rest of your life. As far as our business is concerned, what you saw is the really sexy part of our business, and I'm really sad to tell you that, unfortunately, I handle all the stuff that doesn't float. So the Viking Yacht Company, which is the crown jewel of the Viking Group, is just one part of a larger machine. We have over 3,000 residential real estate units in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We have several commercial properties, mostly strip centers in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We do, up until very recently, we had a natural gas and oil exploration company that we ran for 27 years in the Appalachian Basin. If any of you are familiar with the Utica Shale, it's right out there in West Virginia and Ohio. We sold that 2 years ago for $107 million, which was a large liquidity event for us. We have our own in-house investment banking group, which does all of our investing. We parcel some of that out with managers, but we do a lot of that in-house with our own team. We also have 4 charity organizations that we run, one of which I'm sure we can get into later. Mike does a lot of work in Sierra Leone, West Africa, so it's extremely global. The other of which goes into Catholic schools in the inner city, grade schools and high schools, and teaches them how to recruit and how to support themselves. And the other 2 are much smaller charities. So that's you know, some of our businesses. I think I covered
Give us a quick flavor, Bob. How did you go from being, you know, to that broad of a business, becoming what we refer to as this idea of an enterprising family? How did that happen?
It was extremely organic. As you saw by the video, we are 50 years old, the company. One of the things, and I should mention, we're also redeveloping a 16-acre parcel in Florida, right on the waterfront in West Palm, actually Riviera Beach, so we're the master developer for that project. All of that stuff that I just described to you is totally organic. There was no 10-year or 20-year plan for it, frankly. What happened was my father was an attorney before he and his brother bought the yacht company. He made a lot of money subdividing land, basically. He had some partners out in New York when he was a young man, and they would buy parcels, subdivide it out, sell the lots, and they made a pretty penny. And so real estate's kind of always been in our blood in one way or another from a very young age for him and his brother. You know, during the 80s, we purchased, I think, 5 apartment complexes in Dallas, Texas. And really, we bought them because we had cash on hand. We were looking for something to do with it. My father knew real estate. He had a legal background. You know, we did all our due diligence and decided these were a good price. We bought them out of receivership from the bank. And we're very lucky that we did that because in 1989, the luxury tax hit. If any of you are familiar with that, the federal government put a 10% tax on luxury items, including boats. We went from, I would say, about 80 boats a year to 12. We went from 1,000 people to 85 people in the span of 1 year. And the only thing that saved our company was liquidating what we had bought 8 years earlier in Dallas, Texas. It had gone from whatever we paid for it to being worth about $20 million. And we liquidated the whole thing and threw it back in the yacht company. We kept ourselves afloat for the 2 years it took to repeal the tax. And the quarter after we repealed it, we were profitable again. You know, so the value of real estate for us bared itself out. When you talk about an in-house investment banking group, we're very funny in that we would rather not pay a management fee in any business if we think we can do it ourselves. Sometimes that works really well, and sometimes you make a big mistake doing that. And I suppose the trick is to figure out which times are which. During the crash in '08, again, our industry took a hit. We're luxury items, basically. So we went from about 1,300 employees down to about 400. We went from 102 boats a year down to 35. And the only thing that kept us afloat then, because we couldn't hawk the real estate that we had, was our investment banking group. We bought Ginnie Mae's under par, and we basically leveraged that about 10 to 1. I think we were Wells Fargo's third largest bondholder with $500 million. And we used, and where we got the money to do that, by the way, is a $40 million working capital line with no restrictions from Wells Fargo. So we drew down money from one end of Wells Fargo, leveraged the crap out of it, and then used it to buy $500 million in Ginnie Mae bonds, which returned, because the cost of money was so low, about $1 million a month for 18 months. And we put all that back into the yacht company. It sounds wonderful. There were horrible times where we got margin calls, and I can remember our CFO going, "Don't answer the phone, it's Wells Fargo." And then the next day the bonds would go back up, and then we didn't have to make the margin call. So we've been very good at throwing Hail Mary passes with our other businesses. It's scary, and sometimes it's not very fun. But the point is, when you're diversified like us, I tell people, it's not always, every piston doesn't fire 100% all the time. You're never making money in every single business you're in. But no matter what, somewhere we're always able to shift and turn on a dime when we have to, because we're that diversified.
Opportunistic. Good. Michael, will you share with us, and as questions come up, please shout out. But I want to make sure we hear, Michael, you hinted at a fundamental issue for your company, which was that and I'd like you to talk about your core values and how those core values are reflected. They come from the family and they're reflected on the shop floor. And that is felt and it's real and it has a bottom line impact. So I want you to talk about that. But then you hinted at how those core values were suddenly confronted with the reality of, in this case, the China price, the global marketplace. And it's like you've got your core values here and the global marketplace, and they smacked head on. It had to be painful. You talked about 6,000 employees and now 40% of that. So talk about your core values, how they're reflected, how it impacts the business, and that conflict.
Sure. The remanufacturing business is a people business, and it's not a capital-intense process. It's a labor-intense process. People make up everything that we think about on a day-in and day-out basis. Sometimes we say our core competency is really managing low-skilled labor. It's not producing product, because that really is the challenge that we have. Our firm belief has always been to take care of our people, and that stems from a deep faith in Christ that our family has, and how we want to care for our people or the communities that they're in. And as we started the business, one of the things that we felt we were here to do in Philadelphia was to create jobs for people that normally wouldn't be able to find jobs. So we built our business around a very diverse workforce of immigrants that came into Philadelphia. Today we've got like 40 different languages spoken on the factory floor. And it really was an amazing way of, from our perspective, creating a business that was profitable, making money and reinvesting in it, helping people develop, grow throughout the business, grow their skill sets, and have a great place to work. And so that we did for over 30 plus years as we grew the business. And we really felt a calling to be here in Philadelphia and help the community. And so,
Michael,
that's kind of...
Just to interrupt, but it's operationalized. I mean, talk about how it's operationalized, because that's really amazing. And so you take it for granted, I think, at one level. But because
on our website, we lay it out. I mean, our 4 corporate objectives are to honor God in all we do, help people develop, pursue excellence, and grow profitably. ultimately, for us, it's a deep part of everything we do has to honor God. So that plays out in our values and in valuing our people, our work, and our mission with everything that we do around us. And excellence is a key part of that. We always believe that, we could say anything we wanted and do anything not do anything, but say anything we wanted and be able to be that in the marketplace if we were the best. And so that's how we ended up building the business. And we played that out in a couple of different ways. We have a family foundation. We take about 10% of our profits, put that into the foundation. We focus on organizations around our factories. So we want to be with organizations that are there to help our people because we hire basic level jobs, and we're talking about our competition is typically McDonald's, Burger King, and things along those lines, and our people can come in and learn a base set of skill sets. Their issues are different than we face on a day in and day out basis. And so one way we've done that is to really focus our foundation giving around that. Another way we've done that, we have full-time chaplains. A lot of people look at them as HR specialists. They're chaplains. We actually tie them to metrics, believe it or not. Their number one goal is to reduce unplanned absenteeism, which is a huge cost for manufacturers. I mean, you know that. And it's really an expensive proposition for us to not have somebody at work because we've got a very efficient production line. So we've been able to take our unplanned absenteeism and we really focus it on this, looking at the whole person's life, because if you really break it down why people don't come to work, it's not because they don't want to be there. We have tried to create a phenomenal environment. People love to come to work. It's because they have a personal problem. Somebody's in the hospital. The daycare closed down the street. They have financial issues. They have, little things like that they might not talk about it, but our chaplains will have a personal relationship with a lot of people and are able to guide them, help them look at, and then we've got a referral book about this big of different areas that we can guide people to and help them. So people just don't know. So a lot of it is just saying, hey, here's these 3 programs you can help you. We'll walk you through the process. We'll help you get there, and they get back to work. And it really engenders a sense of spirit, and we call it our factory family because that's the way we treat everybody in the business. And one of the things that we're in Philadelphia, we're a manufacturing company, you're a union. I mean, that's just how it works. And we've always had a great working relationship because our number one goal, we said, look, we're going to take care of the people. You just got to help us do it. And whenever there was an issue, we said, you come and talk to us about it. We'll figure out how to make it right. But one of the other aspects that we do in terms of driving our culture down the business, so we have our chaplains, we have our foundation. One other key program we do, we have a employee designation program for some of our executives. They're able to designate some of that 10% to certain charities of their choice. The other aspect is we have what we call Take 5. So every morning across all parts of the world, and we even did this in Europe when we had it, for the first 5 minutes we have what we call our Take 5. First part of that Take 5 is some business things. We go over if we want to do some basic training, some quick key points for some people to understand and learn. The last part is a voluntary part of the meeting, and we ask for prayer requests, and we read typically a devotional or a quick Bible verse that we see fit as we want to talk about in the business. And we find not many people leave that part of the meeting. And so it kind of sets the tone. It lays it out for everybody, so we're able to have both parts of our culture laid out throughout the business. The last, probably the most important piece for our management is we have developed our Cardone management training, if you will, or management program, and we have based it off of a servant leadership model. And a lot of that work has been done out there through a lot of folks. We've kind of brought that in, crystallized it into our program. So our managers, I mean, that's kind of our leadership model. That's what it is. If you don't like it, this is not the place to work here. So we have kind of laid that out, and we just feel that's the most effective management style and management program out there. And look, for us, we always say, you know, there's a lot of good, if you will, examples out there. I mean, you've got big companies that use the model, Southwest, Starbucks. I could go down the list. But ultimately, for us, you know, we think an unbelievable model of that was Jesus Christ in the Bible. So we kind of lay that out throughout the business.
So with those core values in mind, then your business model gets turned upside down when new parts come in from China at a price point that is, I mean, you know the story, but so suddenly.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because we came to a point with one of our product lines where it was bleeding. And there was no way in the world, we looked at it upside down and backwards, and that's what you do as a family business. You try to find every single way possible to keep it what you're doing and make it work, and there just wasn't. So we really got to a point, and I'll take it back 10 years before that decision point, because we actually looked at moving to Mexico 10 years before that. And we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for 10 years. So, I mean, that tells you how much we really felt tied to Philadelphia for the time. And so finally it was to the point we just said we have to do something. And so you know, our president at the time, I was kind of young in the business, he said we kind of have to do this, but it needs to be a test. And whoever's going to do it can't fail, and we're going to give you very little money to make it happen. So I said, I'll do it. So, hindsight's 20/20. But I figured basically at that point in our business, the way we were running, there really was nobody else that could do it because you needed a level of impunity to be able to go out and do something kind of crazy like that. And sometimes in a family business, that's kind of what it takes to break through some things. And so we did a test pilot. We started with 3 people in Mexico in 2003, got the business up and running, and ended up, you know, by the time we got to the point of seeing tasting success, it was really a mad dash at that point. How fast can we get this product line to Mexico? Because we have a chance at making some money again. And we had a great experience. We had some great advisors in that role to help us kind of wade through the right way of setting things up, and which is a critical component in international growth. And we began a very aggressive move on a bunch of our different product lines because, like I said, we're a very labor-intense business. So the arbitrage between Philadelphia and Mexico was just staggering, and it was great for us. So. Yeah, I mean, you know, we were talking about taking, you know, a company who's Philadelphia focused and a group of managers who really wanted to protect what we had here, regardless of what even the family said we had to do. And, you know, it was interesting to that process as we went through product line after product line, looking at the business case, the challenges of people saying, no, we can do it here, we can do it here, when the facts said differently. And the first line was kind of easy, I will say, because we were leaking oil. It was not pretty. And so, but ultimately, I mean, if I blew it up, they could blame us and we could move on and say, hey, it was an experiment for the family, that's great. We'll keep doing what we're doing, that's fine. We had something going on. But, you know, I was motivated because I believed the numbers. I saw what was there. I knew we could do it. And we made it work. We made it work. But, you know, there is a level of risk-taking at that most people in a family business probably wouldn't stick their neck out to go do if they weren't willing to kind of, you know, if it failed with somebody else, they might say, hey, you're not going to be here. So we'll work it through. But I think it just took somebody to say, I'll do it. You know, great, let's go. And that's how it kind of played out.
Michael, did you look at other countries other than Mexico? And then also, the second part of that question is, can they capture the same culture that you have here in Philadelphia?
So let me answer the first part of that. I'll go back.
Just for the purpose, the question was, did you look at other countries, and then what about the culture issue and the values, because they're so important here in Philly, and now you're someplace else, and did you just give up on those values?
So the first part is we did not look anywhere else overseas, and I'll explain why. You could have made a compelling case back in 2002, 2 and 3 that labor rates in China were so low, you should go there, but that's not the only aspect. See, for remanufacturing, we're actually a supply loop. We're not a supply chain. We ship product to our customers. When you buy one of our parts in an AutoZone store or a Pep Boys store, you're going to buy the new one, replace the old one, bring the old one back, and our customer sends it back to us. The challenge with overseas is to extend a supply chain months, and at that point overseas, having to ship the old one over, remanufacture it, ship it all the way back. You're talking about months and months of time. And when you're dealing with OE product that's on a car somewhere else, there's just not that many of them out there. So you can't fill a supply chain full of old core on every single product line that you have. Just to highlight that a little bit, when we moved to Mexico, we put a distribution center in Dallas. That's 2 days away from our manufacturing plant, basically. And we still struggle today to have enough core to fill 2 days on some of the kind of, if you will, more or less popular models of cars. So an in-country, for-country model works a lot better for remanufacturing because you have the supply loop and the logistics costs just get too crazy after that. The second question on the culture, number one thing that we said going into Mexico is we're not going to let the culture go. I will say with the Mexican culture in of itself, you have a very strong family orientation, and you have a very strong faith orientation, albeit more Catholic than Protestant, but there's still a faith-based orientation. And so us bringing both of those things into Mexico actually just really translated well. The other thing that's interesting about Mexico that we found, two interesting scenarios. So I told you earlier we had 40 different languages spoken in the factory. Training is an issue when you have 40 different languages spoken, I just want to tell you. When you got to Mexico, we had leaders that we moved down to help out, and they said, this is the easiest thing we've ever done. We only have to do it once. They all speak Spanish. It's great. So you had that aspect, but also Mexicans are very, they have a lot of level of ingenuity. They make do with what they have. The basis for profitable remanufacturing is making do with what you have. You take the part apart, you figure out what you can use, so they really took to that as well. So as we've expanded, we've had to kind of systematize more of that and grow that. So we have chaplains down there just like we do here. We help organizations around Matamoros, Mexico, where we're at. So we were able to do a lot of the same things and engender a lot of that in there. We're continuing through our next phase with that in our business as we grow to the next level, as we continue to drive other parts and see our culture kind of continue to evolve and develop. But I would say we were able to bring a high level of our culture there. Did anything not work? The biggest thing that didn't work, I'll say this. We thought we had high turnover here. We turn over about 15% here in Philadelphia on purpose. We don't. That's a good thing for us, actually. It helps keep our base rate where it needs to be. And we're able to train people in 30 to 60 days to get them up to speed, so it's not really a big issue. When we transferred product lines down to Mexico, what we found was that with a turnover rate that's higher, you have to systematize and you have to really take your game up on documentation, specifications. And it wasn't the fact that the people on the line wouldn't do what you said. You just had to make sure what you said was right. And so what we found was a lot of the things that we had documented weren't really what we needed to do because the people here were like, I know how to do that. I know it says that, but I do this. And so you had a lot of tribal knowledge that was developed here in the States because we had less turnover. And so we still have one of the benchmark turnover rates down in Mexico, but it's still twice what it is here. So it's a whole different way of managing at today. So we're still in the transition process. That's kind of been a new, I would say, insight that we've had in the last, I would say, 2 years that we've been down there to really, truly understand what that really meant on the factory floor. But it's really been a great experience overall for us.
Robert, will you explain to us localization? People use it all the time that if you're going to be international, localization is a key. What does that really mean?
I guess the best example is just use Spanish as an example. So, I mean, look, there's a lot of people in this world that speak Spanish and conversationally speak it quite well. But there's various types of Spanish, and so there's a difference between the Spanish that's spoken in Mexico, there's a difference between the Spanish that's spoken in Spain, South America, really all parts of the world. And quite frankly, there's a difference between the Spanish that's spoken in the inner cities of New York and Philadelphia and the Spanish that's spoken in the suburbs of New Jersey. And so that's what we call localization. If you're coming into a marketplace, you have to understand really the culture of the geography that you're going to be working in or you're planning on doing work in. Because if you don't get the inner workings of that particular geography and the people that that you're marketing to, you can invest a lot of money in either a marketing campaign or trying to brand your business, and if it's not done in the right way, you're going to be leaving a lot on the table because there's a certain element that that's not going to play well to that specific geography and those specific individuals or group of individuals that you're trying to put your brand in or market your business to. So it's a critical component. Well, the question is it a dialect change or a culture? And the answer is really it's both. It's not only just about the dialect, but about the culture. So once again, the example using Spanish spoken that's in the inner cities of New York and Philadelphia, and the Spanish that's spoken in the suburbs of New Jersey, that really plays to the culture of the individuals. And so language, in our industry, language is very dynamic. It changes all the time. And so just think about the English language and how it's changed just from a technological standpoint, and how technology has changed the words that we use, social media, things like that. That's really the same in terms of any language that's spoken throughout the world. So.
Robert, I'm reminded of the story we had Ann Unanue, who's one of the owners of Goya Foods, which is the largest Hispanic-owned business in the United States, talking about, to your point, how he views the United States as an international market. And one of the competitive advantages that Goya has is that their people are on the ground and they recognize that different areas, different cities, different neighborhoods have different demands. So that in the case of Goya Foods, they have people on the ground in neighborhoods in the U.S. and they track those neighborhoods. And if there are Guatemalan immigrants in a particular neighborhood, they know that they eat red beans. And that as that neighborhood changes and becomes Nicaraguan, that now the products that that Goya needs to be putting into that supermarket are no longer red beans, they're black beans, because Nicaraguans eat black beans. And I'm sure I'm getting the bean color wrong, but the point is, they view localization as even in the suburbs of Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. If you're going into, let's say there's an organization that's coming into the United States, if you're looking to do business in Brooklyn, right? There's a certain dynamic in Brooklyn that's different than Philadelphia, that's different than Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Trenton, or wherever it might be. And so the need for language service sometimes only comes as an afterthought to organizations. Some companies, after they've saturated their local markets, but in reality, if you're going to invest a certain amount in how you market yourself, your organization, your brand domestically, we try to kind of guide organizations, not just from a service standpoint of providing people that do translation and interpretation services, but it's really about understanding the marketplace that they're trying to go into, because there can be a lot left on the table if there's not an understanding, or a lot that's spent that's not spent in the right fashion, and as such, you're not getting a true return on your investment for what you're trying to do.
Could you speak to, you've been in the business, you said now seven years, could you speak to the transition in leadership between your mother and yourself or your generation, and also specifically, has the business changed and evolved, and how has it changed as you've taken over the leadership?
Sure. So probably like a lot of family businesses, we're a smaller family business, and so my mother ran that business for many years from a sole entrepreneur style business, and things were held pretty close to the vest. And so when I came on board, different perspective, and my brother and I both run the organization from a daily standpoint, and so we came at it from different angles. But that being said, I think the organization was run pretty close to the vest on a lot of different levels, from decision making to how money was spent. And I think in a lot of family-run businesses, there's a historical mindset that's tough to overcome sometimes in terms of this is the way we've done it, this is the way we always will do it. I could say in our business that necessarily wasn't the case so much, that there was some flexibility in coming on board. But when I came on board, it was analyzing the organization and how it was run and how I wanted it to run. And it took a little time to do that because the historical mindset not only comes from the entrepreneur, in this case being the family member, but then that's sort of translated, pardon the pun, to the individuals that are working for the organization. So, as an example, we had people that have been working for our organization for 15 years. And after I kind of got settled in and figured out, hey, what is it that this person does and what they were going to do, I had told those individuals to say, hey, look, you've been doing X, Y, Z for really the last 10 years. Congratulations, you're now our Director of Interpretation Services. And I think that was really hard, in some cases a hard sell, because they were so used to doing things a certain way and not having a lot of autonomy in making decisions or spending money or doing staff management. I think that was probably the biggest hurdle in taking over a family-run business the way it was. But that doesn't happen overnight, and I would say probably in the last the last 5 years or so, that we've really changed the culture of how we look at the organization from a sole entrepreneur to a more style of where we have divisions, we have staff management from different people, and really giving a lot of responsibility back to those individuals that do business. And as far as our industry is concerned, the language service industry, the industry has also changed quite a bit, so we've had to change our mindset. And, it used to be back in the day for our business, if you spoke Spanish or any language, then you can just go off to an assignment and interpret. But the industry has changed, and it's been much more regulated over the years. So, like I said before, there's a lot of individuals, as an example, that speak Spanish and speak Spanish well. That doesn't mean that we would send them into a hospital environment to interpret complicated medical terminology. There's a lot of liability in that, in terms of not only the hospital but ourselves as an organization. And so it's not really just about the language, but it's about the skill set as well. So, the way our business works is that we have a core group in-house, project managers and coordinators and the like, and then all the linguists that do work for us are primarily subcontracted out. And so depending on the language or the skill set, they might work with us, almost every day or once or twice a year. But part of it for us is also, we get people, who are interested in working for our business that say, hey, look, my cousin's brother speaks Spanish. When can he start? Well, it doesn't really work that way anymore. It's not a hobby; it's a profession. And so we tell people, look, the fact that he speaks Spanish or Portuguese or Russian, that's a great start, but that's not the finish. And so, where the industry has changed and where we've had to really change our model is about really kind of a grassroots movement almost to educate not only the clients that we work with, but actually the individuals that are looking to get into the business, to say, look, at a very minimum, you have to have language proficiency in the language that you're speaking or translating. But if you're going to be working, as an example, if you're going to be working in a hospital environment, you have to go through certain medical certification courses for medical terminology. If you're going to be working for and doing interpretation in the court system, you have to be court certified, and you have to go through a process of testing and things like that. Background checks, immunization shots, and so there's compliance to confidentiality and HIPAA regulations. I mean, I can go on and on.
So,
And
but was that a hard sell for your mom because you've got a senior generation that's used to doing it her way, and suddenly an acknowledgement that this business is limited to your wingspan, Mom, unless we change the business model. So is that that's a different risk level, different investment level? It's a big change.
It was a huge change, and I think a huge change for everybody. I tell you what was the impetus for, I think, her letting go, and it was the technology piece. I think she readily acknowledged that there was a technology piece that she just did not fully understand, and that for the business to go from where it was to where we thought we wanted it to be, that there had to be kind of a relinquishment of, how she ran the business, and really giving us a lot of autonomy in making those decisions to grow the business in a way that we felt that we needed to do that. Because, look, quite frankly, technology is just very dynamic. It moves very fast. And so the reality is you have to kind of shoot your arrow this way to try to meet the mark, if you can even do that, because, what you make as a decision, how you make your decisions one week can change very, very quickly.
So is it, yeah, question, yeah.
I just want curious how exactly did you deal with this conflict with your family? Because just like Bob said, I think I can never work with my family. I was in the band too, so.
You were in a band also. Fantastic.
There's hope for you, don't worry.
So I think it's like earlier generations, they are more, more experience driven, and probably nowadays people are more data or technology driven. So it's really hard to communicate. I mean, to persuade them to, into a new, brand new, business model.
I mean, really good question. I think in our model and how we kind of sold it, quote unquote, to the family members between each other is that, in reality, we needed both. When I came on board, there was a cell here for us that said, look, I told people, I found that the path for me was good because I didn't necessarily want to come on board at an early age and have been quote unquote groomed by my mother. I felt that there was outside experiences that I gathered in business that was very transferable, whether it be working for the family business or doing something different. And so the sell to the businesses says, hey, look, we're looking at it from a different perspective in terms of how this organization can be run and what we can do internally. However, if we come in and do that, you can't just leave. There's a certain level of experience, relationships, and really the face and the heart of the organization that really can't go away. And so that's how we kind of sold it, because we kind of felt like we needed both elements to work in tandem to be successful. That makes sense.
It does. Bob, I have two questions for you, Bob. One consistent with your question, because you've gone through a leadership, or in the midst of it, and doing it and making it happen, and it's bumpy, as always is. And then, back to the global issue, talk, as you have dealt with international customers, because you're manufacturing domestically, but you are selling across the world, some of the challenges you face there. But first to the family, and the question that he was asking.
Well, the way I've found, and our family is undergoing almost done a leadership transition. So my father is 85 and his brother is 86. And they are both still very much, well, my father's still very active in the business. His brother, my Uncle Billy, is slowing down a little bit. My cousin Pat is the boat builder. You saw him on the video. He does a great job doing that. But what I found was successful in introducing new ideas and convincing my father or even my cousin or my uncle of certain ways of doing things is that, we're lucky that, or I'm lucky that my father and his brother listen to their managers. They don't assume that they know everything. And so what I found is if you can win those managers over, you can then use that to leverage your position. I mean, it sounds very Machiavellian, and in a way it is, but I found that first off, if you think or you know that you're the smartest person in a room, you're probably in the wrong room. And by that I mean I am 30. I'll be 31 in May. I've been doing this for 7 years. I did something else before that, which I think there's a lot of life experiences that translate over, but certainly not everything. And I went into a business that, just to give you an example, the yacht company CFO's been there for 33 years. The head of our development, our real estate development's been there for 32 years. And the CFO for our investments and our tax stuff has been there for 25 years. So by and large, these guys have been there longer than I've been alive. So the first thing I had to realize was I can't come in there and tell them what the hell to do, no matter what my last name is and no matter what title I may or may not have been given. I came in basically saying to them, look, I know what I don't know. Teach me how to do this stuff. And from learning to interact with them, and it's a long process. It's 7 years, and there's still a lot of bumps in the road with them and with my family. But I've managed at least to convince them that I'm not a complete idiot, and that, while I certainly trip plenty of times, and they do too, we pick each other back up because we're all working for the same goal. As the Cardones have said, culture is really important to our organization too. And what we found is, as long as you have that culture, everybody ends up pushing towards the same goal, the same success. So what I would say to you is, and I don't know what business you're in, but it's important that you be humble if you get back involved with your family's business. No matter how smart you think you are, you're not that smart. And no matter how stuck in their ways management might be, generally I found, at least in my experience, that they've got a lot of valuable information. They've got a lot of life experience that you can't just push aside. That being said, if you can convince them to see things your way, at least on some things, I've used that to then go to my father or my uncle, and when I've said, look, I think we should do something this way, and they said, no, that's the worst idea in the world. If our CFO goes, well, Bob, Bob's gone over it with me, and the numbers bear out, and I think, they may have something here, you can see him turn. I'm not saying it happens at the table that day, but, 2 weeks later, my father might call me up and say, I've been thinking, Bob, the thing we talked about, I think we should do it this way. Of course, it's his idea now, but that's okay, as long as it gets done. So, but it's often, at least for me, it's often not pretty. There's a lot of headache and a lot of heartache. I was telling Mike that the way I measure how well we get along as a family in our business, and not all of my siblings work in the business, not all of my family members work in the business, there's a few of us, but the way I measure how well we get along is no matter what the argument is or when it happens, we still all get together for Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter. So we still all sit down at the same table, and we still all get along, and there's no feuding. So that's usually my litmus test. If we can continue to do that year over year, then we're doing something right. If that ever changes, then I think I'd have to take a real hard look at what's going on in the business. One thing that I tell people, and I've gotten that question at several of these kind of things that I've done, like at the University of Maryland, where I've talked to a family business class. And the question's always, well, how do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with... And the one intangible I would tell you is, apart from everything else, all the experience and all the culture that we have, the one intangible that a family business has that I don't think any other business has is there's a lot of love here. I mean, at the end of the day, at least hope, you all love each other. And that helps you get through a lot of difficult times. It helps you get through luxury taxes when you lay off 600 people. And prop each other up. It helps you get through 2008 when Lehman crashes, and every board meeting's like going to a morgue, and you walk out of there, and the last thing that the thing you're most thankful for is, hey, at least I'm going through this horrible time with somebody who I sit across the table and I love very, very much. So, as far as competing internationally, if you want to talk about the China price, I can give you two quick stories. One about how dealing directly with China was helpful to us, and then one how it's not so helpful. We, if anybody's from this area and familiar with the Cherry Hill Towers across the street from the Cherry Hill Mall down on Route 38, We bought that property several years ago and rehabbed it. So that's our property. We run it, we manage it, we own it. We stripped it down to its, basically its concrete structure and rebuilt the whole thing and took it from a drug den to a luxury apartment complex with 444 units. When we did that, I was a pretty young guy, but I was helping with the budget. And we had a big problem because we had taken out a construction loan. We had, gotten all of our financing in place, and we had spent a lot of money litigating with the town, which is another story in and of itself. But we had a lot of money sunk into this project before we even broke ground. And suddenly, as we're doing the budget, construction costs are going up, and we're going, oh my God, we're going to have to put like $30 million of our own money into this because we can't get any more financing because all the materials are going up, and how the hell are we going to turn a profit on this? So we had a guy, and you want to talk about culture and respecting people, we had a guy who did our blacktop work for all of our apartments who was from China. He's native of China. He was Kim Shu. He was about probably 40 then. And he walked up to my father one day on the site. He was doing some of the blacktop work to get the site ready. And he said, I can go to China and get you all this stuff cheap. My father goes, Kim, come here for a minute. You serious? Yeah. This, well, Kim, we want to use Italian marble. I mean, these are going to be high-quality apartments. Yeah, there's towns out there that do Italian marble. Yeah, but it's not Italy. Well, it looks like Italian marble. So my father, 3 weeks later, gets on a plane with Kim Shu, the blacktop guy, my mother, Ernie Neppa, our CFO, and Mike Clark, our head of development. They get on a plane. They fly out to China. They spend a week going through all these factories. And you know what they realize? Holy crap, Italian marble is $18 a foot back here to get in the States, and it's $2 a foot out here, and it looks exactly the same. Everything in the Cherry Hill Towers interior-wise is all from China. The toilets, everything. It's all high-quality stuff. It looks great. I lived there for 3 years, and it's all from China, and that's how we made the numbers work, is we bought from China. Now, there's some caveats with that. I mean, we had a guy who was local. We had a guy who could source it correctly. He knew who the pikers were, and he knew who the quality producers were. We didn't just go in blind. And certainly after that trip, there was a lot of due diligence that we did. But it still stands that we did it. When you talk about the yacht company, the other quick story I'll give you is if anybody's familiar with Sunseeker Yachts, who are a competitor of ours, we are the #1 sport fishing production manufacturer. And what that means is we don't do custom boats, although a lot of our jobs are customized. And Sunseeker is a direct competitor. They, in 2010, were negative and got bought out by an Irish leverage buyout firm over from Ireland for about $25 million. That's what they bought the company for, 80% of the company, ownership in the company. They then cleaned the balance sheet up. They didn't sell that many more boats, to be quite frank with you, but they cleaned the balance sheet up. They made it look pretty. And in June 7th of 2013, they sold that company for $300 million to a Chinese company. Now, why would a Chinese company pay $300 million, and what does that mean to us? They paid $300 million because in China there's a 60% VAT tax on boats. So if you want to buy a boat outside of China, you got to pay 60% over whatever you're paying on the cost of it. Basically what that means is we don't sell into China. Nobody in their right mind is going to pay that kind of money even for one of our boats. And why is it worth $300 million to them? Because even though they have sworn up and down that they're going to keep the manufacturing in England, what any of the stories don't tell you is this: they're opening up 2 manufacturing plants in China. They've bought marinas in China, same company. They're going to manufacture the boat in China, slap the Sunseeker name on it. And what happened to their sales when it comes to us? They plummeted from 2007 to 2013. We had a lot of their customers come over to us because in our business, our brand is what sells our boat, the quality of our boat. Our guys are high net worth guys. So look, when you're spending $3 million on a boat, $3.5 million isn't that much more to you. I mean, it's just not. To them, it's more important about having the quality and about having the name than it is about the price. And so for Sunseeker, being associated with China has hurt them badly Now, they're going to make a lot of money selling into China. I'm sure they're going to be very, very profitable. But when it comes to our markets, Europe, which is primarily Europe, the Middle East, Russia, internationally, and then 70% of our products sold here nationally, all of those customers don't want anything to do with them anymore because now they're associated with China, and it's been a real kick in the knees to them.
Do you source any parts from China?
No. Not really. 90% of what we put into those boats are made in-house in New Gretna. We do have a cruising line, Viking Sport Cruisers, which is made in Plymouth, England, in partnership with Princess Yachts. But that is done to our specifications, our punch list. The boat is not a Princess boat. It's a sport cruiser boat. It's a Viking boat. But it is made over in Plymouth. And it's done so because the Europeans have a very different taste when it comes to cruising boats than the Americans do. There's a lot of differences. There's a lot of much more narrower, sleeker, it's just a different market.
Yes, let's take a 10-minute break. It's 10 o'clock. We'll come back, and I know there's 3 or 4 other questions. We'll keep going with some questions. So we'll take a 10-minute break and come back. One question I have for all 3 of our panelists, I want to continue to get feedback from you all, but I'd like you to talk about what are some of the biggest mistakes that you think you've made as an organization as you've gone international or worked with international customers, worked in international markets, competed globally. Bob, what are some of the fun experiences or mistakes you feel you may have made? And I think, Bob, let me ask you to, before you speak to that, you are international not only in exporting your boat product, but you also, as you referenced before, your philanthropy is international as well. So you are involved in international philanthropy.
I mean, we like to call ourselves entrepreneurial philanthropists. So what that means is we don't tend to be check writers when we get into philanthropy. We tend to be operators, just like in our businesses. I don't sit on a heck of a lot of boards of public companies. If we get involved in a company, we manage it, take an ownership stake. So one of our charities does medical relief to Sierra Leone, Africa, which is a country in West Africa. If anybody's ever seen the movie Blood Diamond, that's the country they're talking about. And if you've seen the first 20 minutes, it's pretty accurate. It's actually a lot worse than what they show there. It underwent a really brutal 12-year civil war. We got involved because we're Catholics, and the Archbishop used to hand-mouth it across the country for about 6 weeks, preaching at different parishes, including our small parish in Hainesport, New Jersey. And, we used to have him over for dinner, and we would donate to an orphanage here or there, cut him a check for a couple $1,000s. And when we really started to learn about what was going on over there and saw how much money we were giving, we really said, okay, well, we're not check writers. Is this a place we want to get involved in? And the answer was yes, and so we started the Healey International Relief Foundation. So when you want to talk about interesting stories, international, the third world is just a whole other ball of wax. I mean, you're talking about a country that was the jewel of Western Africa. It had the first accredited university in West Africa, one of the best hospitals in the entire continent. And in the span, at one of the highest literacy rates in the world. So in the span of 12 years and 1 civil war, it now has the highest infant mortality rate in the world, has the highest child under 5 mortality rate in the world, it has the highest pregnant women death rate in the world, and it is just absolutely in shambles. So, most of what we do there is not heart surgery. It's Band-Aids and bandages and a lot of maternal care stuff. And we ship probably 30 to 40 containers a year worth of goods over there. And we do most of our work through the Catholic Church. We do that not because we're in the business of evangelizing. I don't really care if we convert one more person over there to Catholicism. And as a side note, it is not a predominantly Catholic country. It's predominantly Muslim. I think it's 30% Christian and 20% of that's Catholic. We work through the church because, frankly, they're honest. Stuff does not fall off the back of a truck with them. When I ask for an invoice, I can get it. I mean, the Catholic Church has a culture of reporting. It has a culture of doing relief work, regardless of the country it's in. And so it manages to insert that culture into whatever country it gets itself involved in. And so what we have and I should mention, we're going to be doing actual business in that country, just not relief work. One of the programs we're setting up is a 50 clinic program. We're going to do 50 clinics in the rural area, the bush country out there, mostly maternal care. And, how do you fund that? I can, I go around asking for donations to a myriad of people, and so does our executive director. And sometimes you get it, and sometimes you don't. But that's not sustainable. So how do you create a sustainable philanthropic organization in a third world country? And the thought that myself and our executive director came up with is, well, what can we do as a value add in this country? And the value add ended up being, every disease in this country dehydrates you. So yellow fever, malaria, diarrhea. When you go to a hospital, the first thing they do is stick you with IV fluid, because regardless of what they diagnose you with, chances are you're dehydrated. And they pay $14 a bag for this stuff. You can buy it here in the US for about $1. So that's a big spread in the shipping, because they got to ship it all in. The nearest place that manufactures those IV fluids is in Nigeria, which is very far away. So it all gets shipped in. IV fluid is basically saline, so it's salt, some sugar, and water, all of which the country grows and has. And so what we are going to do is set up an IV production facility. And we're going to use the profits from that to fund our clinic program. If that sounds like a really roundabout way to get to making something sustainable, you're absolutely correct. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, do I want to set up a manufacturing facility in a third world country, I would have told you were crazy. But, here's the thing. When we really started to look at it, we said, okay, well, what are our big barriers to doing business in Sierra Leone? Well, you've got an undertrained workforce. Well, that's easy, because apparently the training to actually manufacture this stuff doesn't require, it's 30 days to get them trained. Okay, fine. Management. I mean, you're talking about a country where corruption's a way of life. And not because these people are bad. The normal person over there makes $200 a year. When you're unloading drugs from the back of a container that would sell on the market for, $300, if you just stole a case of it, and you've got kids to feed, what's the decision you're going to make? You're going to steal. I mean, it's not that these are bad people, but it's a culture thing. So how do you mitigate that? Well, why don't we put sisters in charge? Why don't we put the religious in charge? They're honest. They've seemed to work with us for the last 10 years. So we came to find out there's the Hilton Foundation out in California does training for religious, particularly sisters. And they train them to run businesses in third world countries. So they train, they train them to do the accounting, to do the manufacturing, the floor management, everything. So they're going to come in and do the training piece for us. Okay, well, that solves that problem. Well, what about setting this stuff up? How are you going to build this thing? After vetting many, many companies, we found a turnkey one out of India that's done 20 of these in West Africa. And then you talk about your profits. How are you going to make money off of this? Well, come to find out, the nearest manufacturing facility is in Nigeria. We're not the only ones paying $14 a bag to ship this stuff over. So is the government. So is every other NGO in this country. And by the way, next door is Liberia and Ghana, both of which are in not so great shape. And they're shipping this stuff in. They've got the same diseases. So we did some quick math, literally on a table napkin in D.C. one day, and said, look, we know this is how much goes into Sierra Leone. We know the populations of these countries, so we'll make some educated guesses. And guess what? Right as we were doing that, flashing across my phone, there's a document from the European Union who does all of the medical procurement for the governments of those 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Ghana, that says, if somebody builds a medical facility that manufactures medical goods in one of these countries, we'll make them a sole source supplier. Well, okay then, there's your market. And so we're in the process now of doing the business plan, and basically we're going to be able to sell to the government, NGOs, and 2 other countries that are next door, because it's cheaper to truck this stuff in than it is to ship it in overseas. So that's, I mean, if you want to talk about a massive amount of headaches, do business in the third world. It's tough, but you know, as Catholics, I tell people that's where divine providence comes in. All of those chains of coincidences, I don't believe are coincidences. You know, I think we're doing good things, and I think luck usually has another hand in it.
Robert, in your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes, challenges either you have made in competing globally or you've seen your clients make?
Excuse me, sorry. I think probably the biggest mistake that we've probably made internally is probably not heeding our own advice to some degree. And so I'm sitting here talking with you know, all the individuals and groups out here today, and about how important it is to, you know, make sure you play to country or the people that you're trying to do business with or you're trying to communicate with. Well, the way our business works is that we have a core group in-house, but all the linguists that do work for us are subcontracted out on an as-needed basis, like I had mentioned before. So the organization has really evolved and the industry has evolved so that the qualifications and what we need to do to bring up the standards of our service really come from our subcontractors, the individuals and the linguists that are doing the work, the interpreters and the translators. And so the challenge has always been, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make them drink. So insofar as educating them on what they need to do in regards to their own professional qualifications and being a representative of our organization. And so I think, you know, we try to do it as a template across the board about what that needed to be. In reality, you know, in our industry, it's very, very diverse, very eclectic in terms of the individuals, and you're going to have to kind of treat those individuals and those groups very differently in order to make them drink. And so there was a period of time I think we were kind of banging our head against the wall in terms of, you know, bringing up the standards of the organization, and then we realized, well, we can't really communicate the same message to all these groups because it's not going to, once again, pardon the pun, it's not going to translate the same. And so we have to, yeah, I think we kind of lost the forest through the trees a little bit in terms of being able to provide, you know, information to those groups. And that was a kind of a lesson that we learned, you know, over the course of a year, and I felt like we lost some time to do that, because in reality, the information that we're disseminating out to the individuals that are working for us, in some cases, is really kind of educational. We come to universities, we come to different speaking engagements and talk to potential linguists to do work for us, and in reality, we know that it's not to have them be able to work for us tomorrow. It's for them to be able to work for us in a year or 6 months or somewhere down the road, to educate them and say, hey, look, in order for you to do work for our organization, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and that doesn't happen overnight. And so I think we were trying to look for the quick way out, and we realized there is no quick way out. And sometimes you have to put a lot of hard work and effort and be able to get to a point somewhere down the road to better your organization. So
It's a good point. Jim Collins talks about, are we as leaders brutally honest? Are we brutally honest with ourselves? And if you were not brutally honest, it would be really easy to say, we're doing all this training, we got all these resources for all these people out there, but they're just not getting it. We get the wrong people, right? I mean, that would be an easy solution. That'd be an easy answer for you all. And yet, I think to your credit, you're saying, if you're really brutally honest, you look in the mirror and you say, what part of this are we not doing right? And
yeah, I think for us, we made a realization that we kind of felt like we were commoditizing our own services, which is not who we are,
yeah.
You know, and how we were marketing and presenting our services to other groups. And so, yeah, lesson learned there, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, just the observations as an outsider, how easy it would be for you, though, to say, hey, the problem is there, when in reality you're acknowledging the problem was really with you guys. And how you're doing.
It really comes from, you know, the leadership within our organization to view us not where we're going to be or what we need to be now or in a week from now, where we're going to be in 6 months or what we need to do in a year from now. Because if we don't position ourselves and our people and put them in the right position, then we're not going to be successful, because we're going to find that the industry has changed and the requirements have changed. weren't have enough insight to be able to change with that, then we were going to find ourselves in a year or two down the road and saying, wow, what happened? Or know that we needed to change and didn't do anything about it. And so, yes, you're running your business on a daily basis, doing certain things, but you have to look down the road in terms of either the products. You know, the individuals that are up here are always looking at their product lines, I'm sure, in terms of being relevant. You know, in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, it's no different than our service. You know, you're talking about a product or your service, but you have to make sure that the service is relevant down the road.
I'm listening to you say that, and I'm thinking, Mike McGran, you need to do a better job of that. I mean, because it is so easy to get sucked in the mud of the day-to-day, just pulls you in, and you put on the hip boots, and you're slogging through it. And how often do we step out of the mud?
Well, there's a minutia of the day-to-day, and I'm sure every individual up here at some point, and probably still does, wear a lot of hats. You know, for my organization, we're a smaller organization, so you know, when I distribute my card out, it says COO, but I'm the CFO, I'm the human resources manager. Oh, and by the way, I take out the trash on Wednesdays, and I wash the dishes when they're dirty in the sink. So, you know, if you're not careful, I think you could start your week with an agenda in your brain about what you need to do for your business. I need to do X, Y, and Z because we're thinking about expanding into this market, or we're thinking about providing services for different industries. At the end of the week, you could be really, really busy, but it was never on the stuff that you intended it to be. And I think it takes time to kind of structure your organization so that you have the proper people in your organization to be able to delegate some of that minutia to. And until that happens, then you're always going to be stuck in the muck. And to some degree, I'm sure there's still an element, you know, of the people that are here that you're still doing stuff that maybe that needs to get done, but in reality, you kind of feel like you shouldn't have to do it. That kind of takes you back from the 5,000-foot view as opposed to, you know, it's the old adage, working on your business and not in your business.
Great point. If you're going to be international, you're going to compete globally.
Yeah, you have to. So if you're going to compete globally for business and market your organization, and in our case, try to recruit organizations or do education for our service and do all those sort of things, I can't be washing the dishes and taking out the trash every day. You know, I just can't. So.
Yeah, it's the tyranny of the urgent. Michael, really two questions. One, sort of, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen? You talked a little bit about those. Could you also talk about, though, in your role as president, what was your own personal development path to get you prepared to lead an organization that is in many different countries and selling throughout the globe, et cetera? So those two questions, mistakes or biggest challenges, and then your own personal development.
Well, let me talk about our Europe business, because I think it encapsulates one of the biggest mistakes that most people make going into internationally, and that is we underestimated our ability to scale the business. Europe's a way different market than the United States. When we got into it, we looked at the size of the market, we did all of our market research, but ultimately, you know, Europe's still a bunch of different countries. They might have one currency, but it's still really different. Things are sold differently. There's still huge cultural divides. Things are not done the same at all in each of those countries, regardless of what they've done to unify things. It's just made it easier to pay for things in different areas. That was probably the biggest issue I think that we found. We grew the business. We actually were one of the largest privately held remanufacturers, and we were the largest caliper remanufacturer in the whole EU area. To put that into perspective, that was about the 10th of the size of what we do today here in the States on calipers. So we were the largest, but gaining scale was tough. Labor rates were tough. Labor laws were tough. So we kind of underestimated a few things in those areas, and we just weren't able to scale the business. And that was our biggest challenge. We just couldn't get the scale. So, you know, fast forward to today, one of the things that we are doing differently in Mexico is we're following our existing customers into a new market. So they've kind of gotten out there, stubbed their toe, put a system in place. We get to provide product into a system the same way we provide product today to those existing customers. So it becomes a much easier way of going to market, number one. And number two, we've got huge experience in country in manufacturing. So there is a cultural dynamic and understanding of how things work in Mexico. We just kind of understand a little bit of that. So that's made our entrance in Mexico a little bit more concerning, as if you will, from that perspective. You know, as far as my development and getting ready for my position, you know, I did a lot of the standard educational aspects that you need. I've undergraduate in business. I have a graduate degree from Thunderbird International, which is a top-tier international program focused on global business. So, you know, from the training aspect, we did that. I did our initial European business development. My brother-in-law and sister went and ran the business for 6 years once we did our first acquisition. After I had done that, started our Mexico operation in Mexico. So kind of on-the-ground, hands-on kind of experience in country helps out a lot. And then, you know, like I said earlier, I learned every aspect of this business. I was able to train under my grandfather, my father, learning, you know, the deepest, most intimate details about how to run a remanufacturer. So couple that with education, experiences. I learned a lot about that. We did a lot of outside training in different specific areas that were needed along the way. And so that kind of got me to where we were at. You know, my own personal talents and gifts were much more along the strategic line than, you know, the day-to-day in the weeds kind of thing. You know, you want to torture me to death, put me in a production line and try and get half a cent out of each product that's coming out every day. That might drive me insane. I mean, but we got guys that do that incredibly well, and we need those guys. But, you know, working in that area and helping move the business more in that strategic thinking area was where I kind of pushed into my development.
What about personal, where you think, in terms of your development path, was there any place where you stumbled?
You know, I would say, you know, moving into a couple of areas, you know, I took over sales and marketing in 2009. One of our key guys who helped work in Europe as well was retiring, and we had a really strong bench in our sales organization. We didn't probably need all those guys, but none of them would end up working for each other. So ultimately, as we were going through and working that, and just to put a background around it, we really were in the midst of talking to a strategic buyer at the time, behind the scenes very quietly, so we wanted to keep the organization as steady as possible. When I look back, probably I would have needed a little bit more out in the field experience in sales. I mean, I spent time with the customer. I was at the trade shows. I did a lot of things like that, but actually in the field, from working on the account up all the way, give me an account, make that thing work. That was probably one aspect that was a little tough in terms of trying to get things rolling. So as I tried to make changes that I thought needed to be done, there wasn't this backdrop of, you ran an account, you get it. It was kind of like, guys, it was this constant back and forth. You know what you're doing. I'm going like, look, here's the facts. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So we had a lot of that. I would say that probably was a lot of that. Problem is we were kind of wearing two hats at the time, and so we were running through that. But it needed to be done that way for the time being. Then I would say that would be one in particular. I would say, you know, looking back, ultimately, I think having a couple years somewhere outside is important in any family business. It really is. I didn't. I did okay, thankfully, but it takes a lot more work that way. And I think it's great for the person, the family member, and even those in the business who you're working with to say, hey, look, they've been out there, they've kind of been there and done that. That's great. It's a good experience. Good stuff.
Mike, I guess your family and the company is undergoing a transition now, or in the middle of it, or maybe towards the end of it. How's that playing out, and what do you see as the next level for your company?
Yeah, we're, you know, in terms of what a family business, we're in one of the kind of largest, one of the hardest transitions that any family business tends to go through. my dad reinvented himself hundreds of times over the years because we went from 4 people to 6,000. There's a lot of different step-ups along the way that you have to get through. And
Seriously, Michael, went from 4 employees to 6,000.
yeah, it started out with 4. And basement
That
of a
is
row house in
unbelievable.
North
That's
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they went through a leadership transition with my grandfather as well in the midst of that time. But Robert, you talked earlier. You said you had a small business that was entrepreneurial focused and run. I said we had a big business that was entrepreneurial focused and run the same way. I came out of grad school with a lot of finance experience, and training. I'm like, Dad, we got to get the financials. Everybody says, nah, there's 3 people that see the numbers. That's it. I didn't know how you run a business without showing people the numbers. I didn't get it. It was kind of this, and so I thought that it took me 12 years to sell them on the fact we needed to do that. But, but again, a lot of decisions were made that way, very tight-knit. It was all focused on, he being the key, and it worked well. It worked well. I'm not complaining. Today, though, we're undergoing a massive transition, and part of what, and I was talking to Mike earlier, part of that outside experience would have been great to have in another way, another system of running a big business. And when I learned how to run an entrepreneurial business, how it works, all that stuff, there's a discipline and a rigor at a business our size that has to be run a certain way. And so we brought in a new CEO. Wait, let me back up. We did also go through a private equity auction process in 2011 that we walked away from. So our view of that was we all identified the changes that needed to be made. And they're just massive because it really was going to be a top-to-bottom change and evolution of our culture and how we handle business. And it really was along the right side of what we call the right side of our servant leadership model. That's a lot of the accountability stuff. Driving accountability through an organization our size is different than it is in a shop where we had 100, 200 people in the beginning. You go into the floor, accountability was pretty immediate. I can tell you that from experience. The transition that we've been going through is after we did that, we said, you know what, this is our business. We have to make the changes. So we're going to kind of go through the playbook that the PE guys were kind of laying out. We started looking for a new CEO. We split the chairman and CEO role. At the time, my dad became chairman. We brought in someone to help us split those roles, and then we did a search for a new outside CEO, brought in an outside CEO, outside CFO. We've hired some outside general managers, some technical people at certain areas that we needed, technology, some different areas, because the folks that we had weren't on the bus. They didn't want to kind of move in the direction we needed to move. And so it's a big undergoing. The second aspect is we've, through the leadership with my sister taking us through this, we've really begun to take our family governance to the next level. Going through that for probably 3 or 4 years in the on and off kind of selling process, a lot of the things that we learned, and Mike can attest to this because he remembers when we were a lot younger, my sister and I going through the process in a former life that he had, he helped us put a lot of these things in place with the team that he was working with at the time. And, we needed to really focus on it. So really getting our family governance in place, building that part of our business. We're just, really focusing hard on reconstituting our board. We have an outside board of directors. We've got, we're kind of shuffling the deck there, bringing in some outside experience in different areas that we hadn't had before. So, I look back and it kind of is dizzying to think about it, but in family business, you kind of just go. I mean, you just do it because you have to. And you don't look back. And thankfully, we've had 2 great years. Things are moving in a good direction. There's always challenges when you bring that many outsiders in, and really making sure that our culture remains strong is probably our biggest focus going forward right now. So is that enough transition for one day?
Question back?
My question is for Robert, and it concerns interpretation. Before I pose the question, let me just give you a little piece of background.
I think there's different components of that, in as far as language services and the difference between that and a cultural component of doing business overseas, whether it's China or any other country. And so you have to remember, from our standpoint, the service that we provide, or one of the services that we provide on the on the interpretation side, is interpretation. And insofar as true interpretation is concerned, the interpreter is there and is just really relaying exactly what's being said. They're not providing anything more or anything less. They're not paraphrasing. They're not giving their judgment on what they think is being said. And so if there's a quote-unquote breakdown in communication or style, it usually is not coming from the interpreter. It's coming from the people that are doing business together, because once again, the interpreter is really relaying the information word for word. And so really that, I think that then kind of punts it back to cultural differences. And there are organizations and consultants that work with businesses in terms of, if there's an interest in doing business overseas, how to best attack that in terms of, look, when you go to do business in a boardroom or anything like that, you can't just go in with the style that you've had from wherever it might be, New York or Philadelphia or Texas, because it's not going to play well, and there's going to be some differences in terms of either cultural differences or how just business is being done in general. So to me, that's sort of sounding where the breakdown is. There are organizations that you can that can consult with you and saying, hey, look, before you even start going into a boardroom and talking about how you're going to run your business or do different business, you have to have an understanding of the nuances of how business is being done. Anything from where and how you sit, to what you say, to the understanding of the culture in terms of even timetables. Some cultures are a little bit more laid back and don't have any really kind of cognitive understanding of what a timetable is. It just happens when it happens. And so there has to be, I think, an understanding between the cultures of how to best do business before you even get to a point where the interpreter is involved. Because if that doesn't happen, whether you have an interpreter and translator, running the meet, or with you at the meeting, it's not going to make that much of a difference. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more of a system issue than
it's a system issue, and not really a language issue per se.
Yeah.
It's more about how organizations are doing work with each other and having an understanding of how the best way to do that is. And it's an important component depending on what you're trying to get done, because what we try to tell businesses is, like, look, if that sort of thing happens, we're trying to educate organizations that said, look, you need to kind of look down the road a little bit, because if you're conducting these meetings and things aren't getting done and timetables or whatever the case might be aren't being met, in reality, you're paying a lot more down the road to try to fix those issues than you are ahead of time. And in our business, I think, unfortunately, sometimes the language component and the cultural component is really kind of an afterthought in terms of, hey, we sell this, they buy that, and we can do business together. But it's not always that easy. And so, if you're going to make the investment, my suggestion is, make the investment across the board, so that, yeah, you're going to be paying a little bit up front to bridge the gap on the cultural component and the language component, but it's going to cause less headaches down the road in terms of understanding of what either the supply chain is, or expectations, or anything else in terms of what you're expecting from them, and conversely what they're expecting from you.
I just say one thing, because we deal with this all the time. The cultural and language aspect just makes everything harder, but ultimately, you could find a Chinese company who makes this blue book, right? But you kind of need the blue book to be like half an inch bigger, and they all go, oh yeah, I can do it, no problem, no problem. But when you really get down to it, there's a lot of mechanics behind that. If you're not down in the factory, understanding how the process works and knowing all that, and a casserole dish might seem simple, but nothing ends up being simple. And no, and you can't take anything for granted, down to the exact amount of material that goes into making a casserole dish and how high, whatever, they have to, bake the thing, how hard do you want it, what do you want to, I mean, it just, and then walking through the supply chain, it takes very deep hands-on experience, working on it day in and day out to stay on top of it until that thing starts to prime the pump.
Yeah, because you can have like
We've had that
10,000
issue constantly.
you have like 10,000 casserole lids that don't fit the dish. And
The other thing is
then what?
this, I will say the other thing is this, you don't stop checking, because you might get a different casserole dish about 6 months from now, just out of the blue.
Well, no, I agree with you. We need this one, so the culminating point is really, and I'll give you a concrete, is that casserole dish which goes into a chain in New York is produced in a certain section of China. The lid is produced elsewhere because I'll use the word, the culture, the engineering capability is totally different. So, to have a match, that dish has got to be right. Yeah, can't change, otherwise the lid doesn't work. We got stores in Manhattan.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Couple more minutes. Any other questions? Other questions? Yeah.
Could you share what was the biggest barrier, or what was the hardest time you have ever met when you were trying to go global? And the second question is, what do you think in the coming 5 years what will be? What kind of the biggest barrier will be?
What was the biggest barrier, and as you look forward, what do you anticipate is the biggest challenge for your company globally or other companies in general?
Yeah, each.
Oh, both, okay.
Yeah, no, it's too hard a question.
Biggest barrier in the last 5 years? I would say certainly doing business in Asia was not easy for us. On the boat side, on the yacht side, as I was telling you, I mean, we stayed away from China and Asia, mostly China, because at the time we were looking at going into China, even before the VAT went up to 60%, we were afraid of knockoffs. Somebody disassembles your boat, figures out how to make it, and then starts producing it themselves, and rips off your brand, and it's happened out there. And, then we're an American coming to the Chinese law courts trying to get our brand back, and, it's a mess. So we made a very conscious decision, forget it, we're not even going to bother, we do well here, and we took on a dealer in Singapore to handle Southeast Asia, and he sold one boat in 10 years. I mean, he was, And about 2 years ago, I sat down with my cousin and I said, look, I worked in Hong Kong for 5 months doing some other stuff with another family member of ours, and I said, look, we really need to re-engage back out there because, there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table, and I think this can get done without our brand suffering. And so we spent the last 2 years looking at it. And it was really tough. We talked to a lot of dealers, and what finally sealed the deal on a dealer out there was my fiance could have killed me for this. I have a sister who lives in Hong Kong, and she's married to a Scotsman out there who's got a plastics manufacturing company on the mainland. So right after Christmas, December 26th of this year, I flew out to spend 2 weeks with her and her kids, and my brother-in-law and my fiance went with us. And if anybody's a lawyer here, she's in her first year of law school, so you understand just how little free time you get. So this was like 2 weeks where we both had off, and I promised her I would not do any business. Robert was looking to sell his company, and I told her I'd have to spend 1 day there. But other than that, no business, and we just enjoy ourselves in China and Hong Kong. I get a phone call from my cousin 2 days after we land. Bobby, I think we got the right dealer. I need you to go meet him. So I got in a car and went and met with this dealer in Hong Kong, who was a Brit, who had brought in an outside management team because he was getting older, and I met with his president. And they had a very different way of being a dealer out there than a lot of dealers we had dealt with. You know, most dealers that we had dealt with wanted a 5-year contract with you and then an option to renew based on a lot of stipulations that we had never had in our dealer contracts. And you know, what the real answer to that is, what they really want is to sell your product for 5 years and then figure out how to take it apart and then get rid of you. I mean, that was the bottom line. And that's what it always ended up coming down to. They had 2 locations on the mainland, but what they also did was handle the rest of Southeast Asia. So they sold into Singapore, they sold into Thailand, they sold into Malaysia, and the reason they did that is because they found that most of their Chinese customers never even went to their mainland locations. They were keeping their boats in Southeast Asia, even though they were from China. And, you know, and so, I mean, they said to us, look, we don't spend a lot of our marketing budget on the mainland. We spend it in Southeast Asia, and we're still capturing those Chinese customers because this is we're selling to where they keep their boat, not where they live. And that was something that, you know, we just had never really thought of for that segment of the market. And so, you know, we still haven't closed the deal on him, but I mean, he's the lead horse. And so now we're going to go into the Asian market, and in a fairly big way that we never kind of envisioned. We always just thought it was totally a useless proposition and a waste of our resources to look into that. 5 years ahead, I have no idea. Certainly, we do a lot of business with Eastern Europe. There's a lot of money out there. I would say current events make that a little questionable. I mean, I can tell you that we've had 3 deals in Eastern Europe in the last 2 weeks fall out of bed. So, you know, you can take that for what you want.
Yeah, I would say probably for us as we begin to kind of push south, if you will, Mexico's wide open. It's a matter of us just continue to push through the project that we have in place. Like I said, existing customers growing there. As we go push further south into probably into down South America, regulation will be an issue for us because at that point we'll have to be in country for country. Our product gets classified as used. And there are a lot of regulation around importing used product into countries in South America. So that kind of takes us away from importing product into countries like Brazil and Argentina and the like. Venezuela is out of the question, even though they have a large American car population down there. It used to be a decent export market for us. But as we begin to look at that, we will tiptoe our way into other markets through export. We do a little bit of that. That kind of gives us an idea of what gets sold, where we can sell it. But I would say that's probably our biggest. And building the management infrastructure around running a remanufacturing operation in another country. Mexico is one thing. I mean, it is a border. You know, my in-laws live 20 minutes from our factory across on the U.S. side. So I stay with them when I go visit the plant. I'm at the factory in 20 minutes. So it does make a big difference. And then developing the whole, if you will, ecosystem of remanufacturing within a country, trying to get the market to go that way will be the biggest challenges that we see. But I think it will continue to grow as a need. With diminishing natural resource and a lot of things along those lines, our business will become more important in servicing cars over an extended life cycle. It's hard to produce small lots of new product. Even China can't do a lot of that. So we have the ability to remanufacturing gives you the ability to do one. You can take one part, take it apart, fix it, clean it, put it back together, and sell it. There's not many manufacturing processes that can do that. And I think as the cars proliferate and there's more vehicles out there in different countries, this will become a very viable service model for vehicles everywhere.
I think as we expand into a global market for our organization, we're very fortunate in a way, and in some cases it poses a challenge. And I think our biggest challenge is this. For our services, you know, we potentially can work with, quite frankly, anybody in this room that might need the service. It could be as simple as somebody that's walking in, a student that's walking in and needs their transcript translated because they're looking to come into the United States and go to school, or it could be a Fortune 500 company that's looking to do business worldwide. And so there are, globally for us, a zillion opportunities. But I think if we're not careful, you can dilute yourself very quickly. If you don't really answer the question, who do you want to be and to whom? Whereas, we can certainly provide the service to anybody that's walking through the door. I think our biggest challenge in going global is figuring out really kind of what our specialty is. Who are we going to be in terms of whether it's the medical world, the legal world, the manufacturing world, and being experts in that particular industry, because I think there's a value in being able to be industry experts in certain fields, not only in language services, but in that particular field. So, we're looking to diverse our services, but we are not looking to dilute our services, and I think that's a big challenge for us. There's a difference.
Good. Good advice, and I think advice that many business leaders we don't always take, but we're being clear on where we focus. If I were to summarize, there's about 4 or 5 points I've heard you say, which I think are just critical. One, there was a conversation about leadership transition, and each of you have gone through a leadership transition. And our perspective on that, and it was mentioned here, is the idea of getting the senior generation to transition up and not out. Senior generation folks don't like to talk about succession because it feels like death to them. We want to take it out of death language and have it be a strategy issue. Senior generation leaders, as all of you pointed out, have incredible knowledge and experience and relationships. We need that. We don't want to lose it. If it walks out the door, we change the resource pool and we can't compete. So leadership transition is not a death issue, it's a strategy issue. And we need you, Mr. and Mrs. Senior Generation Leader, to transition up, not out the door. One point. Secondly, all of you talked about a familyness advantage. And while you didn't use that word, there's a uniqueness. You each have a competitive advantage because you are owned, and in this case operated by family members. Your core values and how you drive that down, and it impacts turnover and productivity. And if that business is sold to somebody else tomorrow, that stuff's going to be lost. That is tied to your family. And this culture that you've created is incredible. And your brand, which is tied, Bob, to your family, and your ability to be opportunistic in terms of how it's a mindset that you have instilled in all of your managers. I mean, you talk about something, when you asked about what do I see in 5 years. What I see in 5 years is Africa. And think about where is there going to be growth? Maybe it's not 5 years, 10 years, but incredible wealth, mineral, natural resources, and companies and countries are focusing there. And I was just talking to someone who works closely with U.S. government and U.S. Sort of long-term strategic thinkers who happen to be located in a building called the Pentagon, and they're taking resources out of Afghanistan and Iraq, and where are they going with those resources? Africa. And they're going to Africa because, and the folks at the Pentagon, they're looking 20 years down the road, seeing that this is a continent that there's going to be growth. And your family, by nature, is opportunistic, and you're going to be manufacturing medical products there. And if I were to guess, I'll bet in 5 or 10 years, you guys are going to be a dominant manufacturer in the medical business. One minute you're making boats in New Jersey, the next minute you're manufacturing medical products in Africa.
Make any special wishes for me.
But that's just, that's amazing. Michael talked about values, and I would challenge family business leaders all the time to take on as a fundamental responsibility as shareholders to clarify what are our core values, what are those values, and are we driving them down to the shop floor? And if we're not, and if this business doesn't reflect our core values, then why are we doing it? Why even bother? Because that's what makes us special. That's part of the special sauce. You talked about the tyranny of the urgent and not letting and having the discipline, and it speaks to the discipline of entrepreneurship. I think all three of you talked about that. The discipline of entrepreneurship, and if you're going to be successful, being global, the need for focus, the need for discipline in terms of our strategy and our planning. You talked a lot about that. And the discipline on the operational level, that if you're going to be in a global supply chain, man, you got to be counting the grapes. You got to be counting the numbers, counting every single day. If you don't, if you let that slide, in 6 months, you're going to have a different product. So, again, I think really critical issues. I want to thank all three of you for your insights and your time. Just amazing businesses that all three of you have. And I want to thank all of you coming. I want to mention our next session. On June 4th, which is Wednesday, June 4th, Chris Lowney, who is the author of the best-selling book, Heroic Leadership. So he wrote a book called Heroic Leadership, Lessons from a 450-year-old Company That Changed the World. That's his book. It's a best-selling book. On Wednesday, June 4th, we're having a members-only dinner. Chris Lowney will be here to speak to us. Does anybody know what that 450-year-old organization was?
Jesuits?
Yeah, the Jesuits. And so he's written a book that looks at what is Jesuit leadership and how has it changed the world. He's an incredible speaker. I heard him speak at the Naval Academy, best-selling book. Really look forward to having you all as our members. Again, we're always looking for members and invite you all to consider joining. We will see you on Wednesday, June 4th for a members-only dinner. We've left a feedback form there. Please fill it out. We really value your input, your feedback. And if you have any referrals or questions, please come see us.
Mike, can I, just real
Yeah.
quick? So just real quick, before we leave, very quickly, in this month's Fortune magazine, I don't know if anybody who's read Fortune or reads Fortune, there's actually a 13, 14-page section in here that speaks specifically to our industry, the language service business, and the global market. I think it's pretty timely in terms of this conversation. If anybody's interested, I have it in PDF format. Just stop by, give me your card, and I'm happy to email it.
Great, we'll
out.
put it up on our website.
Yeah,
So that'd be
absolutely.
fantastic.
Yep.
Good. Thank you all very much, and thank you.